She said, "I settled too young, I want better." After 15 years, my wife left for a bad boy. I set her free. Now he's in prison, and her own kids won't even respect her. I thought I had built something unshakable with Amanda and our twin daughters in suburban Atlanta, but sometimes the foundation you trust most is the one that crumbles without warning. I'm Michael, 41, a civil engineer who believed in structure, planning, and building things to last. For 15 years, Amanda and I had what I thought was a solid marriage built on shared values and genuine partnership. We owned a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage in a quiet cul-de-sac, took annual camping trips to the North Georgia mountains with 13-year-old Sophia and Grace, and hosted weekend barbecues where our neighbors actually showed up and stayed past sunset. I coached the girls' soccer teams on Saturdays, Amanda worked as a marketing coordinator at a small firm downtown, and our biggest arguments were about whose turn it was to drive carpool or whether we needed to replace the dishwasher this year. The routine felt comfortable, predictable in the best possible way. Amanda used to joke that I was her steady rock, and she was grateful for the security I provided after growing up in a chaotic household where her parents fought constantly about money. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., make coffee for both of us, kiss Amanda goodbye as she rushed out the door with her travel mug, then get the twins ready for school. Evenings meant homework help, family dinners at our oak dining table, and Netflix shows we'd actually finish together. Weekends involved soccer games, grocery runs to Costco, and the girls' friends sleeping over while Amanda and I grilled burgers and pretended not to eavesdrop on teenage drama. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Everything started shifting when Amanda joined the Riverside Community Theater Group last spring. She'd mentioned wanting to try something creative, maybe meet new people outside her work circle, so I encouraged her to audition for their production of Steel Magnolias. She got cast as Truvi, the salon owner, and suddenly had rehearsals 3 nights a week plus weekend tech runs. The first few weeks, she'd come home energized around 9 p.m., practicing lines while brushing her teeth and talking animatedly about the other cast members. I was happy seeing her passionate about something beyond work and household routines. Then she started mentioning Dante, the theater's lighting technician who also happened to be a motorcycle mechanic with full sleeve tattoos, a leather jacket that never seemed to come off, and stories about riding cross-country with no destination in mind. "Dante's been everywhere," she'd say while folding laundry, her voice taking on this dreamy quality. "He's lived in 12 different states, worked construction in Colorado, bartended in New Orleans, even spent a summer in Alaska fishing. Can you imagine just picking up and going wherever you want?" I'd nod politely while organizing the girls' school papers, but something in her tone made me uncomfortable. She sounded like she was describing some exotic fantasy rather than a guy who couldn't hold down a steady job. She started staying out later after rehearsals, claiming the cast was bonding over drinks at some dive bar called Murphy's that apparently had live music and authentic atmosphere. Her conservative work wardrobe of blouses and slacks gradually gave way to tighter jeans, leather jackets borrowed from who knows where, and boots with metal buckles that clinked when she walked. When I gently mentioned the changes, she accused me of being controlling and judgmental. "I'm just expressing myself for once," she'd snap, applying darker makeup than she'd worn since college. "Not everyone wants to wear khakis and polo shirts forever, Michael. Some of us want to feel alive." The casual dismissal of everything about my appearance and lifestyle stung more than I wanted to admit. The first real warning came during Sophia's 13th birthday party in our backyard. I'd spent weeks planning it, booking tables and chairs, coordinating with other parents about dietary restrictions, ordering a custom soccer-themed cake because that's what she'd specifically asked for. Amanda showed up 20 minutes late, smelling like cigarettes and motorcycle exhaust, and immediately started comparing my gift, a professional soccer ball signed by the entire Atlanta United team, which had taken me 3 months to arrange through a client connection, to some spontaneous gesture Dante had made for his 8-year-old niece. Dante just surprised her with a motorcycle ride to see the sunset last weekend, she announced to our friends, neighbors, and the other parents. No planning, no spreadsheets, no calling ahead to make sure it was allowed. Just pure magic and living in the moment. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my face burn with embarrassment as our friends exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sophia looked confused and hurt, clearly not understanding why her carefully planned party was being criticized. Grace started crying quietly, and I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending everything was normal while Amanda texted constantly on her phone, occasionally laughing at whatever responses she was getting. That night, after the girls were asleep, I tried to address what had happened. Amanda, what you said today about Dante and the gift comparison, it really hurt. And it confused the girls. She rolled her eyes. Everything's so serious with you, Michael. Can't you just lighten up? Dante would have laughed it off. There it was again. Dante would have done this. Dante thinks that. Dante says this about life. I was starting to hate hearing his name, but I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Amanda's obsession with Dante intensified over the following months, and she began systematically dismantling everything we'd built together with surgical precision. She started questioning every aspect of our marriage and lifestyle choices, treating our 15-year partnership like some kind of prison sentence she'd accidentally signed. Do you ever wonder what we missed by getting married so young? She'd ask while scrolling through Dante's social media posts showing him at motorcycle rallies and dive bars. I was only 23 when we got engaged. I never got to experience real freedom. I'd remind her that she'd been the one pushing for marriage back then, scared of commitment issues after watching her parents' messy divorce. But now, according to Amanda's revised history, I had somehow trapped her into domesticity before she could discover her true self. She began criticizing my career stability with increasing venom, calling my engineering job mind-numbing, and suggesting that Dante's varied work experience showed real courage and authenticity. When I pointed out that irregular employment wasn't necessarily something to aspire to, she accused me of being judgmental and close-minded. Dante has stories, Michael. He's lived. You've been in the same office building for 8 years doing the same calculations. Our mortgage payments became another target. She'd complain about being tied down to property ownership while Dante rented month to month and could move whenever inspiration struck. The irony that her name was also on the deed and she'd been thrilled about homeownership when we bought the place seemed completely lost on her. Most painful was when she started questioning our decision to have children, something that cut deeper than any attack on my character or career. Dante says having kids that young was probably a mistake, she announced one evening while Sophia and Grace did homework at the kitchen table, well within earshot. He thinks we robbed ourselves of our prime years. I watched our daughters' faces change, saw the confusion and hurt in their eyes, and felt something harden inside my chest. Maybe we should discuss this privately, I said through gritted teeth. But it's not like it's a secret. Everyone knows parents sacrifice their dreams for their kids. The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. I discovered Amanda had been lying about theater rehearsals and was actually going to bars and motorcycle rallies with Dante most nights. When I confronted her with photo evidence from her friend's Instagram, pictures of her on the back of Dante's Harley at some biker gathering in Macon, she didn't even try to deny it. So what? I'm an adult. I can go wherever I want with whoever I want. It's not about where you go, Amanda. It's about the lying. We used to tell each other everything. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. We used to do a lot of things differently. People change, Michael. Maybe you should try it sometime. The conversation escalated when I asked her directly about her feelings for Dante. Her response was designed to inflict maximum damage. Dante understands my need for excitement and passion. He doesn't analyze everything to death or make spreadsheets for fun. When I'm with him, I remember what it feels like to be desired instead of just convenient. That word, convenient, hit like a physical blow. 15 years of marriage, and she saw me as convenient. The final breaking point came on a Tuesday night when our daughters overheard Amanda on the phone with Dante in our bedroom. I was helping Grace with algebra when we heard Amanda's voice carry down the hall. I feel trapped in this suburban prison with a man who has no vision for life beyond his next promotion and mortgage payment. You make me feel alive again. Sophia and Grace looked at me with wide, horrified eyes. Grace started crying silently, and Sophia's face went white with shock. I had to explain to my 13-year-old daughters that their mother was going through a difficult time while internally raged that she could be so careless with their emotional well-being. That night, I realized our marriage wasn't just in trouble, it was already over. Amanda had mentally and emotionally left months ago. I was just the last person to accept reality. The end came during what I thought would be a normal family dinner at Romano's, our favorite Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated anniversaries and the girls' good report cards for years. I'd made reservations hoping to reconnect as a family, maybe find some way to salvage what we'd built together. Sophia and Grace were excited, chattering about their upcoming school science fair while twirling spaghetti and stealing bites of each other's garlic bread. For a brief moment, it felt like old times. Then Amanda cleared her throat and delivered the words that shattered everything. I need to tell you all something important. I've decided to leave your father. Dante and I are going to live together, and I'll be moving out this weekend. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sophia's fork clattered onto her plate, Grace's eyes filled with tears, and I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Amanda, maybe we should discuss this privately first, I managed to say, glancing at our daughters' shocked faces. No, Michael. I'm done hiding who I really am. Girls, I know this is hard to understand, but sometimes adults realize they've settled too young and need to follow their hearts before it's too late. I deserve to experience real passion and adventure. Settled too young. There was the phrase that would haunt me for months. Our entire marriage, our family, our life together had been Amanda settling. Grace started crying openly while Sophia stared at her mother with something approaching disgust. So you're leaving us for some guy with a motorcycle? Sophia asked, her voice cracking. You're choosing him over your own family? Amanda's response was chilling in its selfishness. I'm choosing myself, Sophia. For once in my life, I'm putting my happiness first. You girls will understand when you're older. The drive home was silent except for Grace's quiet sobbing in the backseat. That night, I held both my daughters while they cried themselves to sleep, promising them that we'd get through this together while internally wondering how I was going to explain to two 13-year-olds why their mother had abandoned them for a man she'd known for 6 months. Amanda moved out within a week, taking half our savings, her clothes, and absolutely zero responsibility for the emotional destruction she'd left behind. She packed while the girls were at school, leaving me to come home to missing furniture and half-empty closets. The house felt hollow, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of it. I found myself explaining to Sophia and Grace why their mother had chosen a man she barely knew over the family she'd helped create. Grace became withdrawn, barely speaking and picking at her food during dinner. Sophia developed anger issues at school, getting into arguments with teachers and classmates. Their grades started slipping, and I received calls from concerned counselors who could see the girls were struggling but didn't know the full story. I was drowning, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy while processing my own betrayal and watching my daughter's world crumble. I took on extra projects at work to afford the mortgage alone since Amanda's income had helped cover our monthly expenses. The overtime meant less time with the girls when they needed me most, but keeping our home seemed important for their stability. The mandatory co-parenting counseling sessions were torture. Amanda would show up with Dante, flaunting their relationship while acting like the victim of an oppressive marriage. She'd hold his hand during discussions about custody arrangements and speak about their authentic connection, while our daughters sat there watching their mother prioritize her boyfriend over their emotional needs. Michael was always so controlling, she'd tell the counselor, rewriting history with stunning audacity. I finally found someone who accepts me for who I really am. I'd sit there listening to this revisionist nonsense, watching Dante smirk like he'd won some kind of prize, while trying to focus on what was best for Sophia and Grace rather than my own rage and humiliation. The most devastating part wasn't Amanda's betrayal, it was watching our daughters lose faith in the concept of family itself. They'd seen their mother abandon everything for selfish desires, and I could see them wondering if love and commitment were just illusions that adults eventually outgrow. I made the conscious decision to focus entirely on healing my daughter's emotional wounds while rebuilding our fractured family dynamic from the ground up. The first step was getting all 3 of us into therapy with Dr. Sarah Martinez, a family counselor who specialized in helping children process parental abandonment. Initially, both girls resisted the idea, viewing therapy as admission that something was fundamentally wrong with them, But after a few sessions, they began opening up about their anger, confusion, and feelings of rejection that they'd been bottling up since Amanda's announcement. I learned to cook elaborate meals that went far beyond my previous repertoire of grilled cheese and spaghetti, studying YouTube videos late into the night to master their favorite dishes and creating new weekend traditions around trying recipes from different countries that we'd locate on a world map afterward. Saturdays became our adventure days where we'd explore the Appalachian Mountains within a 2-hour drive, taking photos of waterfalls with my old digital camera and teaching the girls basic rock climbing techniques at state parks where rangers offered safety lessons. These outdoor excursions gave us space to talk without the distractions of home, and I watched Sophia and Grace slowly start to smile again as they conquered their fears and built confidence on challenging hiking trails that seemed impossible when we started but became routine accomplishments. Meanwhile, Amanda seemed absolutely ecstatic in her new life with Dante, posting constant social media updates of motorcycle trips to Savannah and Asheville, concert nights at venues I'd never heard of where she'd pose with drinks I never knew she liked, and weekend getaways to mountain cabins where they appeared more vibrant and alive than I'd seen Amanda look in years. Her Instagram feed became a carefully curated showcase of freedom and adventure, with captions about living authentically and following your bliss that felt like passive-aggressive commentary on our former life together, as if every photo was designed to prove how much happier she was without us weighing her down. The girls had court-mandated weekends with Amanda and Dante every other Friday through Sunday, arrangements that initially filled me with dread as I watched Sophia and Grace reluctantly pack their overnight bags with the resignation of prisoners heading to unwanted sentences. They'd return home on Sunday evenings with disturbing stories about loud arguments that lasted past midnight and could be heard through the thin apartment walls, Dante's heavy drinking that left empty beer bottles covering every surface in their cramped living space, and feeling like unwelcome guests in their mother's new life who were tolerated rather than cherished. Dante told us we're too loud when we watch TV, even during the day, Grace confided during one of our family dinners. And Mom just nodded like she agreed with him instead of defending us. Sophia was more direct in her assessment. He treats us like we're annoying kids who ruin their fun. Mom acts completely different when he's around, like she's trying to impress him instead of being our mother. She even laughs at his mean jokes about us. I documented everything they told me in a leather-bound journal my lawyer had suggested, maintaining careful records while refusing to badmouth Amanda despite my daughter's growing resentment toward their mother's choices. The temptation to validate their anger was enormous, especially when they'd ask why their mother had chosen Dante over them, but Dr. Martinez had warned me that turning children against their other parent would only damage them further in the long run and could backfire legally. Instead, I focused on creating stability and security in our own home, establishing predictable routines that gave the girls something reliable to count on when everything else in their world felt uncertain. We started having family meetings every Sunday night where we'd plan the upcoming week, discuss any problems or concerns, and celebrate small victories like good grades or successful social interactions. I taught them basic financial literacy, explaining how budgets worked and involving them in age-appropriate decisions about household expenses, partly because I wanted them to understand the value of stability and partly because I hoped they'd never find themselves financially dependent on someone who might abandon them. The transformation in our home dynamic was gradual but unmistakable. Without Amanda's constant criticism and emotional volatility, the atmosphere became calmer and more positive. The girls started bringing friends over again, something they'd stopped doing during the final months of my marriage when Amanda's mood swings made everyone uncomfortable. I overheard Sophia telling her best friend Emma that our house feels happy again, which both broke my heart and filled me with determination to keep building something better from the ashes of what we'd lost. Dante's true nature emerged gradually as Amanda's fairy tale romance turned into a nightmare of control and manipulation that she was either too proud or too scared to admit. The girls began returning from their weekends with increasingly disturbing stories that painted a picture of psychological abuse disguised as passionate romance. They reported that Dante had established rules in their apartment that seemed designed to eliminate any traces of Amanda's maternal responsibilities. No schoolwork was allowed because it killed the vibe, no Disney movies because they were for babies, and no talking about their life with me because it brought negative energy into his space. He told us we're just baggage that comes with mom, Sophia revealed during one of our therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. And when Grace started crying, he said crying was manipulation and locked us both out on the balcony for an hour while he and mom had a serious discussion about boundaries. The balcony incident particularly disturbed me because their third-floor apartment balcony was barely large enough for 2 adults, let alone suitable for punishing children. When I asked Grace about it privately, she described feeling terrified and confused while listening to Dante yell at their mother through the sliding glass door about enabling spoiled behavior. Amanda had begun showing up to custody exchanges with bruises she claimed were from motorcycle accidents, though her explanations became increasingly elaborate and defensive when I expressed concern. "Dante's teaching me to ride," she'd say, touching a purple mark on her forearm that looked suspiciously like finger impressions. "It's harder than it looks, and I'm still learning to balance." But her behavior during these exchanges became increasingly erratic and jumpy, constantly checking her phone and cutting conversations short with obvious anxiety about getting back to Dante quickly. Through careful conversations with the girls, I discovered that Dante had developed a gambling addiction that was consuming Amanda's savings at an alarming rate. He'd convinced her to loan him money for sure-thing poker games and sports betting schemes that never seemed to pay off but always required just one more investment to break even. "Mom cries a lot when she thinks we're asleep," Grace confided one Sunday evening after a particularly tense weekend visit. She was on the phone with the bank, and Dante was pacing around yelling about how she didn't trust him and how real couples support each other's dreams. Amanda had started missing work frequently, and her coworkers began calling me when she failed to show up for important meetings or client presentations, revealing the extent of her personal decline. Her supervisor, Janet, reached out directly after Amanda missed 3 consecutive days without calling in. "Michael, I know this is awkward given your situation, but Amanda's job is in jeopardy. She's been completely unreliable, and when she does show up, she seems distracted and exhausted. I thought you should know because of the girls." The financial pressure was clearly mounting as Amanda's credit cards reached their limits, funding Dante's various schemes and their expensive lifestyle of constant entertainment and spontaneous trips. The girls mentioned overhearing arguments about money that would escalate into screaming matches, with Dante accusing Amanda of being selfish and materialistic when she expressed concern about their mounting debts. He told her that people who really love each other don't keep score about money, Sophia reported with mature insight that broke my heart. But then he got mad when she couldn't pay for dinner at some expensive restaurant he wanted to try. Most telling was Amanda's gradual isolation from her friends and family members who had begun expressing concerns about her relationship. The girls mentioned that Amanda's sister Lisa was no longer welcome at their apartment after she'd questioned Dante's treatment of the children, and Amanda had stopped attending family gatherings to avoid confrontations about her choices. Her mother called me directly, something she'd never done before, to express her worry. "Michael, I barely recognize my daughter anymore. She looks exhausted and scared, but she gets defensive and angry whenever anyone suggests that Dante might not be good for her." The fairy tale romance that had seemed so intoxicating and liberating was revealing itself to be a carefully constructed trap, but Amanda was either too deep in denial or too afraid of admitting her mistake to acknowledge the reality of her situation. I watched from a distance as the woman who had called me boring and predictable discovered that chaos and unpredictability weren't as romantic as she'd imagined when they became the foundation of daily life. 11 months after Amanda had walked out of our family dinner announcing her need for real passion, she called me at 2:17 a.m. sobbing hysterically, begging to come home after Dante had threatened her during a violent outburst that had finally shattered her illusions about their relationship. "Michael, please, I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm scared and I don't know where else to turn," she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking with genuine terror. "Dante threw a beer bottle at the wall next to my head tonight. The glass cut my cheek and he said next time he wouldn't miss." I sat up in bed, instantly alert despite the late hour, and asked if she needed medical attention or police assistance. She begged me not to call authorities, claiming it would only make things worse, and instead pleaded for permission to come back home, just until I can figure out what to do. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of my life, requiring me to balance my concern for her safety with the reality of what her return would mean for our daughter's emotional stability. Amanda, you can't just move back and like nothing happened. You destroyed our marriage and traumatized our children for a man you barely knew. I realize that now, she cried. I was completely wrong about everything. I threw away the best thing in my life for someone who turned out to be a manipulative abuser. I want to fix this, Michael. I want to rebuild our family and make amends for all the damage I've caused. The woman who had once called our life together settling was now claiming to have realized her mistake and wanted to rebuild our family, promising to attend intensive marriage counseling and change completely if I'd give her another chance. But as I listened to her desperate pleas, I realized that the person who would have taken her back no longer existed inside me. Amanda, I can't do this. You didn't just leave me, you destroyed Sophia and Grace's sense of security and made them question whether family bonds mean anything at all. Her pleas intensified dramatically when she lost her job 3 weeks later due to excessive absences and erratic behavior, leaving her completely financially dependent on a man who had already shown his true character through threats and violence. She began showing up at my workplace during lunch breaks, creating scenes in the parking lot that embarrassed me in front of colleagues and forced my supervisor to ask if I needed security assistance. The most manipulative attempt came when she started appearing at the girls' middle school, intercepting them after classes to plead her case and ask them to convince me to let her move back home. This backfired spectacularly when both Sophia and Grace told her directly that they preferred their new, peaceful life without her constant drama and emotional instability. "We don't want you to come back," Sophia said with devastating clarity during one of these ambush conversations. "Our house is happy now, and we don't miss walking on eggshells wondering what mood you'll be in." Grace was equally direct. "You chose Dante over us, Mom. You said we were holding you back from your real life. Well, now you have your real life, so leave us alone." Amanda's response to this rejection revealed that she hadn't actually learned anything from her experience with Dante. Instead of accepting responsibility for the damage she'd caused, she tried to guilt-trip our daughters by claiming that real families forgive each other and that their father was poisoning them against her by providing the stability she'd abandoned them to find. I had to threaten legal action to stop her from harassing the girls at school, a conversation that finally seemed to penetrate her delusions about reconciliation. "You can't keep me from my own children," she protested. "I can if you're disrupting their education and emotional well-being," I replied calmly. "The custody agreement gives you specific visitation times. Stick to those or risk losing them entirely." The final attempt at manipulation came through her mother, who called to inform me that Amanda was having a complete breakdown and needed her family's support during this difficult time. When I explained that Amanda had made her choice and would need to live with the consequences, her mother accused me of being heartless and vindictive for not helping her daughter escape an abusive situation. I offered to help her find resources for domestic abuse victims, I told her. I offered to pay for therapy and help her find safe housing. What I won't do is pretend that our marriage can be repaired after everything she put our daughters through. Amanda's fantasy of returning to her former life was crumbling as rapidly as her relationship with Dante, but she refused to accept that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt regardless of how desperately you want to cross them again. Amanda's world completely collapsed when Dante was arrested for aggravated assault after attacking a bartender at Murphy's with a broken beer bottle, leading police to discover his extensive criminal history, including domestic violence charges in 3 other states and an outstanding warrant for theft in Colorado. The local news covered the story because the bartender required 43 stitches and reconstructive surgery, and I learned the full extent of Dante's background when Detective Rodriguez called to inform me that my daughters might need to provide witness statements about their experiences in his apartment. "Your ex-wife's boyfriend has been working a pattern for years," the detective explained. "He targets divorced women with assets, isolates them from support systems, drains their resources, then moves on when things get too complicated or he faces consequences for his behavior." Amanda found herself homeless and unemployed within a week of Dante's arrest, forced to move in with her elderly parents in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment 30 minutes outside the city while facing the crushing reality that her bad boy had been a dangerous criminal who had manipulated and used her with calculated precision. The romantic rebel she'd thought she was saving had actually been a predator who had identified her vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically, leaving her financially ruined and emotionally devastated when his mask finally slipped completely. Both daughters chose to live with me full-time permanently, with Sophia formally requesting through our family lawyer to change her last name back to my family name, and Grace refusing to speak to Amanda entirely during their few remaining supervised visits. "I don't want her last name anymore," Sophia explained to Dr. Martinez during one of our sessions. She gave up the right to be our mom when she picked a criminal over her own family. Grace's position was even more definitive. "She's not my mother. Mothers protect their children. She put us in danger for a guy she barely knew." The supervised visits, mandated by the court after Dante's arrest, raised questions about Amanda's judgment and the children's safety, became increasingly uncomfortable affairs where Amanda would cry and apologize while the girls sat stiffly, offering minimal responses and clearly counting the minutes until they could leave. Meanwhile, my life was flourishing in ways I hadn't expected after spending so many months focused solely on damage control and emotional triage. I earned a promotion to senior engineer with a substantial salary increase after successfully leading a major infrastructure project that came in ahead of schedule and under budget, recognition that felt especially meaningful because it represented my individual worth rather than just being part of a couple. The promotion allowed me to purchase a larger home in a better school district, a 4-bedroom colonial with a finished basement and a backyard large enough for the garden Sophia had started wanting to cultivate, and the workshop where Grace and I had begun building furniture together on weekends. Amanda's downward spiral continued as she struggled to find employment while dealing with the legal and financial consequences of her relationship with Dante, who had forged her signature on several loan applications and left her responsible for debts she hadn't authorized. She found part-time work at a convenience store near her parents' apartment, a job that barely covered her share of their household expenses and left her no money for the kind of lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to during our marriage. The woman who had once criticized my career stability and financial planning was learning the harsh reality of minimum wage work without benefits or security, a lesson that came too late to benefit our family but seemed to finally penetrate her delusions about what constituted a meaningful life. The story concludes 18 months after Amanda's departure, with me, Sophia, and Grace planning our first international trip to Ireland, using money from the college funds Amanda had left behind when she moved out impulsively with Dante. We spent hours researching castles to visit and traditional foods to try, with both girls excited about experiencing a different culture and creating new family traditions that belonged entirely to us. Amanda, meanwhile, attended court-mandated therapy twice a week and worked evening shifts at the convenience store, finally understanding that she had traded a loving family and financial security for a criminal's manipulation and a minimum wage existence. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who had accused me of lacking vision and ambition was now living exactly the kind of small, restricted life she'd claimed to be escaping, while the family she'd abandoned was exploring possibilities she'd never even considered when we were together.